Hey everyone, it's the Doom Dog. Tell me something. What would you get if you mixed the shooting action of Max Payne without the slow-mo, the atmosphere of Resident Evil, and the excellent art design of Silent Hill? You would probably get something like the subject of today's video. Today we are talking about The Suffering for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. Like many a game, The Suffering started with an idea. Create a horror game that combines the action of Devil May Cry, the horror of Resident Evil, and the immersion of Half-Life. That is a lofty goal to be sure, but if you were to accomplish such a thing, you should wind up with something that is as unique as it is fun. How did the developers at Surreal Software do? As far as I could tell, this game's development went rather well, and the game came out the other side relatively unscathed. It seems to be one of those rare occurrences that a game went from the planning stage throughout the development stage without much compromise. The team seems to have made the exact game that they were seeking to make. That alone is worthy of at least some praise. The team wanted to avoid the usual survival horror trappings of things such as limited resources for your character and fixed camera angles. They wanted instead to make an action-packed shooter, and that is a fine balance to walk. If you lean too hard into making you feel like a badass, and it being too much of a power fantasy, you can harm the atmosphere that the game tries to build. What the team wound up developing is a horror shooter that was relatively uncommon at the time, but would become much more so after the success of Resident Evil 4 and Fear. For its time, it was a pretty unique title, and it still has some features to it that really help it stand out all these years later. This feels like a unique little horror title made by a passionate group of people that did their best to achieve the goal that they had set out for themselves. The Suffering is an action horror game set on a haunted prison and the surrounding island that it is built on. In this game, you play as an inmate who was sentenced to death row, and your goal is simple. You must stay alive and escape the horrors of the island. What secrets does the island hold? What happened to our protagonist that he is on death row, and is he guilty? Let's take a look at The Suffering and find out. As the game begins, the main character, a silent protagonist named Torque, is being escorted by some corrections officers to death row. One of them mentions that he was tried and convicted of murdering his wife and children. He was convicted of beating his wife to death, drowning one son in the tub, and throwing the other out of the window. The CEO says that the inmates deserve to die and that the needle is too good for Torque. His name is Ernesto. Keep him in mind. This is not the last that we will see of him. Another correction officer calls him out on this, saying that he is a jackass. He was sent to a prison facility called Abbott on a fictional island called Carnate off the shore of the equally fictional state of Maryland. He is shut in his cell, and one of the prisoners recognizes him. The other prisoners start arguing over him. One of them says that he killed his wife and kids and wants nothing to do with him, while the other one says that he killed half the Aryan Brotherhood at another prison called Eastern. He says Torque may be alright. A third mentions that Torque cannot remember anything and that he was convicted based on circumstantial evidence. The prison seems to undergo some kind of earthquake and the power goes out. One by one, the prisoners get picked off in their cells. The lights come back on eventually, and Torque is the only one left still standing. Something breaks the bars of his cell, freeing him. He leaves his cell and approaches the exit to this section when a CEO approaches the bars and orders Torque to get back into his cell. Something stabs him and kills him. The bars behind Torque on another cell fall over. Torque enters the newly opened cell, and he picks up a shiv from the deceased inmate inside. The bars over the exit get thrown into the wall behind Torque, and he leaves through the newly opened door. Further along, a prisoner calls out to Torque to follow him. When he does, you see the ceiling collapse on him and kill him. He needs to turn back and find another way. Torque runs into an officer on the other side of some bars. He runs up to the well-lit area thinking he will be safe in the light. He is wrong as he gets stabbed by one of the creatures that you keep getting glimpses of. And the door to the room beside Torque falls over, allowing him to enter the room. Go ahead and head on in. Shortly afterwards, a phone rings. Torque picks it up and he hears the voice of his dead wife telling him that he needs to get off the island. Torque runs into the first enemy of the game, the Slayer. They are based on the idea of beheading. Also, obvious influence is obvious. Torque takes it down with his shiv, and he runs into an officer. He comes out of the bathroom and points his revolver at Torque. He decides better of it, saying he would rather deal with you than with the creatures crawling all around the prison. This is the game's first moral choice. I will talk about them more later on, but you are given a choice here. You can kill him, or you can travel with him. I chose to travel with him. Later on, you hear some yelling from the room with the electric chair in it, and he goes to investigate it. He gets electrocuted and dies. This is how you get your first gun in this game. A revolver. Later on, Torque tries to enter an office, and a Slayer breaks down the door and attacks him. Take it out. You come across the control room for the gas chamber. There is an officer trapped in the chamber, and this is your second moral choice. There is no good option here. You cannot save him. Kill him by turning on the gas or leave it alone. Enter the room with the gas chamber, and the door shuts behind him. A green ghost will appear in the control room and turn the gas on if you chose to leave the officer alone, and this kills the officer. The gas starts to spill out into the room with you in it, but the Slayer bursts through the glass on the other side. Torque quickly makes his way through the glass and kills the Slayer. Torque runs into the three main ghosts that haunt this island. Horace is the ghost of a man that was sent to death row after killing his wife during a conjugal visit, fearing her being alone in the world without him there to protect her. He seems to regret his actions. Hermes is the ghost of the former executioner of Abbott, who seems to have enjoyed his work entirely too much, and he wound up killing himself in the gas chamber, hence his green gaseous appearance. Dr. Kilgoy is the ghost of a psychiatrist from the 1920s that ran a mental asylum on the island. He appears through projectors, and he speaks in an Old English style. The three of them want to see Torque transform into his beastly form, a gameplay mechanic where he gets angry enough that he transforms into a beast with greatly enhanced strength and speed. It allows you to rip through enemies easily and quickly. Dr. Kilgoy seems convinced that this is some sort of mental thing and he wants to cure Torque. After he eventually does transform, the three observe him and let him go, with Kilgoy saying that he's made a lot of progress today. Torque encounters an officer tied to a stake and blindfolded, and he gets shot by something. Here you encounter the game's second enemy, the Marksman. These guys have a lot of gun barrels sticking out of their backs, and they have a blindfold over their eyes. If you pay close attention when they come up from the ground, you will note that they do so on a stake. They represent the firing squad. They come from an incident during World War II where the commander of a prison camp on this island wrongfully executed a group of soldiers as he believed them to be Nazi spies. Torque comes across a room where lethal injections are carried out, and Dr. Killjoy appears in the room and discusses the procedure of administering one. The ghost seems to be able to interact with the real world. Torque comes across an inmate named Dallas who recognizes him from his time spent at another prison called Eastern. This was mentioned at the beginning of the game where he allegedly killed half the Aryan Brotherhood. This is your next moral choice. Once again, you can kill him or you can try to keep him alive. Torque hears an officer named Hargrave that says that he has the situation under control and that he will cleanse this island shortly after you run into the game's third enemy. These sickly-looking creatures are called mainliners. They have glowing needles sticking out of their backs and needles for eyes. They are based on lethal injection. They will stand back and throw needles at you, or they will jump up at you, grab you, and try to stab you with one of their needles. Torque sees an officer gunning down an inmate, and he sees a vision of his dead wife, who says that she felt trapped in their relationship on 2 occasions, and she regrets both times. He hears an officer over the radio saying that Hargrave has gone nuts and is killing everybody. He sees a vision of his son in a closet saying that he was never his real dad. Torque comes across a group of Hispanic inmates. If Dallas is with you, he knows them, and they have a beef with him. I guess Turf Wars do not go out the window when the prison is attacked by monsters. You'd think that they would set some things aside in the name of survival. You have no choice but to kill them. Horace appears and says that in order to survive this place, you need to become it. He tried to fight it and failed. I wonder what he means by that. Dr. Killjoy informs Torque that Carnate has seen a lot of history of human atrocities. We've seen some of that already. He claims that the island brings out the worst in people, implying that it might have a will of its own. Torque comes across 2 inmates hanging upside down and begging for them to cut him down. He gets a call from Dr. Killjoy, who says that Torque needs to come visit him at his abandoned asylum that he ran. Hargrave was the one that hung the prisoners upside down. He says that his prisoners never make it out alive, and he uses a mounted machine gun to gun them down and kill them. Why does a prison have a mounted machine gun in it? Maybe they got it from the World War II camp that the prison was partially built on? That would make it 70 plus years old, though. Oh well, Hargrave calls his officers in, and Torque is left with no choice but to kill him. Torque hears a couple of inmates call out to him before they get killed by Hermes. A couple of guards are fighting off a group of slayers. When they get killed, one of them drops a shotgun. Pick it up and you have a new weapon. He hears an officer over the radio talking about how he is surrounded by creatures and he has no way out. He shoots himself and the radio falls silent. A new enemy lowers itself down from the ceiling and chokes out an officer. This is the Newsman. He is inspired by hanging. He is the upper body of a corpse that has been skinned, and he is hanging from a rope by his neck. He will lower himself down from the ceiling and try to grab you. Torque gets another call from his wife, and she says that she is pregnant and is filing for divorce. She says she hopes that Torque can forgive her for this. Killjoy traps Torque in a room as he wants to observe his problem-solving skills. He says that this will aid in his attempts to treat you. Torque hears another officer over the radio, and he is terrified and calling for help. He picks up another phone and hears the call from Horace to his wife, telling her that she can come visit. This was setting up the fateful visit where he would kill her and be sentenced to death row for it. He also gets a call from one of his kids saying that he tells people that he does not have a dad because it is less embarrassing than admitting that his father is in prison. Hermes shows up and encourages Torque to kill people. He comes across an officer that you heard over the radio earlier. The officer runs from Torque as he confuses him for a monster. Torque chases after him, and the man realizes that Torque is a human. This is your next moral choice. Once again, you can kill him, or you can travel with him. I chose to travel with him. Either way, your next objective is to get to the radio building and call for help. As Torque is walking along the catwalks, there are various lights that he can use. Shine them directly on the Slayers, and they will light on fire in the bright, intense light. Use this to your advantage. Torque sees a vision of his kids playing baseball with their mother, and they are wishing that he was there to play with them. When Torque finally reaches the radio building, there is interference and you cannot make out anything being said. If you spared the corrections officer and traveled with him, he will say that he believes that the interference is coming from an old asylum. That place has been closed for decades, so I am not sure that that makes sense. Nonetheless, Kilgoy wanted you to come visit him there anyway. That is Torque's next goal. Torque finds a group of officers standing around in the woods outside the prison chatting it up. They are not happy to see an inmate with a gun and immediately start firing on him. He's left with no choice but to fight back and to survive. Torque comes across another person trying to remain quiet when a lantern falls over and it attracts the attention of the next new enemy type. These guys are Burrowers. They will snake around just underneath the surface and pop up to whip you with their chains attached to them. You are given a limited window to attack them, and you need to try to draw them out. They are based on being buried alive. They were born from an incident where a rock tunnel caved in, and the officers left the inmates in the cave-in to die. Torque sees a vision of the inmates hanging officers and skinning them. This is the incident that resulted in the Nooseman. There is a guy that calls out to him and asks him for help crossing the gap. This is another moral choice. You can help him cross or you can ignore him. Make your choice, and a few little girls will show up. For me, they said that Torque was not a bad man and that you have to believe. They leave fire behind you, and you need to work out how to put it out to continue. Torque sees a gazebo and the ghost of his wife standing on it. She talks about the first time that they met, and she seems to imply that she lied to him about her age, or that he did not know how old she actually was. Okay, that's a little weird. But move on from there to the asylum where Dr. Kilgoy is waiting. When Torque finds a way inside, Kilgoy greets him and says that he will do his best to treat him. Torque finds an old bed with a dead officer lying on it, and he is hooked up to an electroshock machine. So you know Kilgoy used some brutal old methods like this, and probably lobotomies. He discusses with Torque the use of shock therapy. Torque comes across a Russian officer chilling on a couch in the mansion. He will talk your ear off if you stand there and listen to him. His plan for surviving this mess is to drink beer, smoke weed, and listen to hard rock and heavy metal here. I'm not one for smoking weed, but I love beer and metal. This is a man after a dog's heart. Seriously though, he is my favorite character in this game. I love him. Anyway, there is a moral choice tied to him. You can kill him if you wish. You can completely ignore him, or you can help him out. He wants to lay here and listen to music, but the power is not working. You can find a way to restore the power, and that will turn the stereo back on so he can relax and listen to some tunes. As usual, the choice is yours. I chose to help him out because he is awesome. Kilgoy wants to use an experimental device on Torque, but it is not ready yet. He will have you come back later, try to find a way into where Kilgoy is. He comes across a dead officer in a room full of ink blotches, and Kilgoy suggests that the man could not handle what was written in the ink. He asks Torque what he sees. In the basement, he says that it is hard finding good help these days, and you get attacked by mainliners while he talks. It can drown out his words, but you need to figure out how to escape the room. Torque gets trapped in a theater, and he gets attacked by Slayers. Once again, you need to figure out how to escape. Killjoy traps Torque in the attic as well. Torque lowers a strange machine from this room down below, and Killjoy's words seem to imply that this fixes the interference with the radio. I guess we need to make our way back to the radio building at some point. Torque finds an officer in one of the padded rooms with his arms and legs chopped off. Killjoy says that sometimes the body is what is causing the brain problems. Yeah, this guy is brutal. The game considers this another moral choice. If you shoot him, it considers it a mercy killing, though the game did glitch out on me and did not give me credit for it. Thankfully, this did not affect the ending that I got. At one point, Torque gets a call from one of his dead children who says that he misses him and wants to know when he will get to see him again. After you figure out how to get to Killjoy, he is ready. He has your beast form chained up. Given that his beast form is part of Torque, I have to question how this is even possible. Oh well, this is some sort of puzzle boss fight with Killjoy. The Slayers will respawn endlessly, and you need to figure out how to put a stop to it. When you figure it out, zap yourself with Killjoy's machine to give yourself what the game calls rebirth powers. Torque zaps the beastly form with it, and the beast breaks free and jumps out of the window. He will run off. Remember this because this is the beast interacting with the real world and separate from Torque himself. I will come back to this later. For now, though, follow him out the window. When Torque approaches the water here, he sees a vision of his kids running off into it. You can chase after them, but they disappear. Further along, he runs across a man named Clint. This is the inmate that has been writing the journal entries for the various creatures on the island, and he is trying to escape from it. He asks that you help. This is another moral choice. You can kill him and go it alone, or you can travel with him. I chose to travel with him. Make your choice. When Torque reaches the beach, he comes across the next new enemy type. These guys are called Festers, and they carry a big ball on a chain that they swing at you. They also open up and unleash a swarm of rats to attack you. They were born from an incident when a slave ship crashed on the island, and the slavers chose to leave the slaves chained to the walls to die and be eaten by rats. Further up the beach, you come across the crashed slave ship itself. The creatures seem to be coming from inside it. Go inside and see if you can do something about that. Re-enter the prison through the sewer pipe draining into the sea, and Torque will come across a locked gate. Horace appears on the other side of the bars, and he says that this place wants Torque, implying once again that it does have a mind of its own. He says that he is waiting for Torque and wants you to join him. He then opens the gate for you, allowing you to move through. Torque sees a vision of a World War II officer accusing prisoners of being Nazi spies and saying that they need to be executed. He eventually finds Horace on the other side of another gate. He says that Torque is his last hope, but he opens the gate for you once again. Move back into the prison proper. He eventually finds his way back to the room with the electric chair. Horace wants you to find a way to free him. This is the next boss fight. What you need to do is figure out how to stop the chair from electrocuting Horace. He talks to you the entire time. He could not stand the thought of his girl out in the world on her own without him there to protect her. He arranged for her to visit, and they made love. After that, he went nuts and started cutting her until she was dead. He went to death row for it. He seems to indicate that this place played at least a part on why this happened. After everything we've seen, I'm ready to believe him. Afterwards, you come across Hermes in the gas chamber. He says Horace is gone and that it is just the two of you now. Torque makes his way back to his cell where he gets a visit from his family members. What happens here depends upon your moral choices up to this point. For me, they indicated that Torque was not a bad guy and not a bad father. Kilgoy gives his diagnosis for Torque, and it says that the monster is all in his head. It indicates that the monster is actually a dark place in his psyche that he can go to enact rage and brutality on anyone that he may need to. Remember back when we saw the monster separate from Torque in Killjoy's place? It interacted with the real world by jumping out of the window before Torque did. So, what the fuck does that mean?
Stay strong.
I do not know.
Okay.
I appreciate the attempt to explain an in-game mechanic via story, but that just does not add up and is confusing. Torque makes his way back to the radio building. If you travel with the officer earlier, you will find out that the officer is now dead. Otherwise, Torque arrives to find that the radio is now working. Someone is saying over it that you need to get the lighthouse working before the rescue can be attempted. This is Torque's next goal. Find the lighthouse and get it working. A truck full of inmates comes barreling down the road when Hermes appears right in front of them. They swerve to the side to avoid him, and they go crashing off the cliff. He's a ghost. Is there any reason that they can't just drive through him? At the speed they were going, he probably wouldn't even have had time to fill the truck with gas to kill them all that way. Swerving seems kinda dumb to me, especially since they all died by doing it. Torque comes across a cliff where the soldiers that were falsely accused of being Nazi spies were executed, and he sees a vision of it happening. Afterward, he gets attacked by approximately 5 billion Marksmen. Thank God there's a mounted machine gun here to deal with that. Move on into the caves, and you find someone tossing dynamite down. Be careful where you step and try not to get blown up. Torque sees a vision of the commander of the POW camp that was here, and he is going to be court-martialed for his actions. He's convinced that he did the right thing, and he chose to kill himself rather than be court-martialed. Later on, you find the guy that was tossing dynamite down at you. He apologizes as he thought Torque was either a monster or an officer coming to take him back to prison. This is your next moral choice. You have 3 options here. You can leave him trapped behind the rock, you can help him by blowing the rock up with dynamite, or you can shoot him through the gap in the rock and kill him. The choice is yours. As usual, I chose to help him. I freed him from the rock. Make your choice and travel on with or without him. Torque eventually finds his way to the basement of the lighthouse, and Hermes confronts him here. He is particularly interested in Torque, and he encourages you to become a killer and to give in to this place.
Yes.
He used to be an executioner here at Abbott, and he was rather sadistic. He particularly enjoyed his work. He is the reason that the gas is green. He wanted the prisoners to see it coming, and he eventually got the urge to taste the gas himself. He killed himself in the gas chamber. Anyways, this is another boss fight. You need to figure out how to slow down the gas that is pouring into the room, so you will lose health slower, and you need to figure out how to deal with Hermes himself. Afterwards, climb up the lighthouse, and Torque will see a vision of his kid saying he wishes that things had been different, and that the two of them could have spent more time together. Here you run into the final new enemy of the game. These are the Inferno. They are a group of 3 little girls that light themselves on fire and leave a trail of flame behind them, meaning you need to watch your step when you're fighting them. They represent being burned at the stake, and they were born from an incident where 3 little girls accused 11 people from the local Puritan village of witchcraft. The people were burned at the stake, and the girls disappeared shortly afterwards. Outside the lighthouse, Torque runs into Ernesto, the officer from the beginning of the game that said that all inmates deserve to die. He is not happy to see you at all, and he does not trust inmates in the slightest. This is another moral choice. this guy has been an asshole, and you can take it out on him and kill him, or you can show him that inmates are not necessarily all bad and travel with him. Make your choice. Torque comes across an old cemetery from the Puritan village. This is where the 11 people falsely accused of witchcraft were buried. Torque gets another call from his dead wife, and she says that she is coming to visit. She gets excited to see him and thinks that two of them can make it work. The generator is right outside the building. Head over and turn it on so the light in the lighthouse will work. Torque comes across the spot where the burnings took place in 1681. 3 young girls accuse locals from the Puritan village nearby of being witches. The town burned them at the stake, and the girls disappeared shortly after. When you make it back to the lighthouse, the light is on, but it is not turning. You need to climb up into it and get it turning. When you reach the top, you find that there are metal blades that appear to be from the Slayers stuck in the gears. Destroy the blades and use the hand crank to get the lighthouse turning again. After doing so, the rescue crafts will come to Carnate to pick up Torque and any other survivors. It is time to make your way to the docks. Torque comes across a gate blocking the road, but Horace shows up and forces it open, allowing you through. The Inferno will trap Torque in a small tunnel with fire at both ends, and you need to figure out how to escape. Hermes appears in front of Torque and tells him to go to the dock. A prison bus comes down the road and crashes, creating a bridge across the broken road. Eventually, Torque comes across a small town that was built for the prison guards. It was built on top of the old Puritan village. The entire place is on fire. If you are traveling with Ernesto, he will separate from you and try to go to town. It is possible that the game will glitch out on you and the fire will kill him. Be careful of this. It happened to me the first time and I had to reload. When Torque reaches the dock, Kilgoy says that he is here to cure him. He set up a machine for you, but Torque needs to be in his more primal form. It needs to be properly powered as well. Torque's kid runs out of the nearby building and heads down to the dock. Follow him, and he will say that a man in black clothes visited the house, and Torque was not there to protect him at the time. Torque's beast form appears at the dock. I guess this battle is meant to be Torque wrestling in his own mind, but the beast can attack the creatures and kill them separate from you. How does this work exactly? Oh well, you need to take him out. After you do, an evil-looking version of Torque will show up, and you need to turn on your beast form and kill him too. Torque's wife appears. I believe what she says depends upon your various choices over the course of the game. Afterwards, a huge beast representing Torque's hatred appears. This is the final boss of the game. Lower Kilgoy's machine and step into the beam to give Torque the rebirth powers once again, and use that to defeat him. As you would expect, the ending you get depends upon what actions you take over the course of the game. For me, men in black masks entered Torque's home. They beat his wife to death. They drowned one son in the tub and threw the other out the window. Someone named the Colonel sent them here to do this and to leave Torque alive, saying he was warned and he chose not to listen. What does this mean exactly? Well, that is not explained. At least not in this game. A rescue ship arrives at the dock, and Torque is the only person there when it does. He picks up Torque and heads back to the mainland. He recognizes Torque, saying that the prosecutor in his trial is being investigated for corruption, and that he will probably get a new trial. The game closes with his wife saying that she never wants the two of them to be apart again. This game has quite a bit of story. There is a lot of lore and world building here. It is all very intriguing. It gives you just enough backstory and lore on the world to keep you interested. I like the story quite a bit. Carnate Island has a very fucked up history involving things like wrongful executions, riots, harsh treatment of the mentally ill. in the name of helping them and even the slave trade. What this game does not do, however, is give you every little detail on a silver platter. Like many a John Carpenter movie or The Shining, it intentionally leaves a lot of things blank. We know the various incidents that created the creatures, but we don't know how. Does the prison have a mind of its own? I don't know, and it leaves you to fill in the blanks. If this is not your type of storytelling, you may not get into it, but I love it. Torque himself is a blank slate. You get little bits and pieces of his backstory, but you never learn much about him. He never has a personality, but I do think this works in the game's favor. What is Torque to you? What do you see when you look at him? Is he a violent killer with a criminal past that belongs here? Or is he telling the truth when he says that he blacked out and he is innocent? That is entirely up to you, and either of those ones is a valid answer. I like this aspect of it quite a bit. There are a few decisions that are a little strange, especially tied to the beast form. It is said to be all in his head. While I do appreciate the explanation of a game mechanic that does not need explaining, it does raise some questions as to some of the things that happen over the course of the game. How does it seem to exist separate from Torque, and how is it able to interact with the real world, like jumping through the window? I don't get it. It's confusing. Here's the thing. I intentionally left a fair bit of this game's storytelling out of this critique because I want you to experience this for yourself. A lot of the story, especially involving the other characters in the game, really depends largely on your actions as you play throughout it. And you can get various experiences out of this game's story by making different choices over the course of the game. And that is the only way to see all three endings. That is not to say that any of the characters you travel with are especially deep. They aren't. But with the lone exception of the first one, who dies so fast that you barely get to know him, there is a little bit of fleshing out of their personality there to make them interesting, at least somewhat memorable. There is something there. It just isn't that deep. The characters that stand out the most, as you would imagine, are the three ghosts. Hermes is such an evil bastard in this game. He has this strange way of pronouncing his words, and it's like he carefully takes his time with them to put emphasis on things he says. It's really cool. The dude absolutely loves killing people, and he spends the game trying to encourage you to do the same. I think he wants you to become the fourth ghost here at the prison. Horace seems to take no particular joy in it, and he wants to encourage Torque to try to escape. He tries to fight against the prison and what it has done to him, and he seems to deeply regret his actions. He seems like he may not be that bad of a person underneath it all, and is just looking for an escape from this place. Dr. Kilgoy is my favorite of the three. He's a psychiatrist from when practice was much more horrific than it is now. He practiced in an age of shock therapy and lobotomies. He seems to genuinely want to help Torque, but he's also something of a sadist. He doesn't care if his patients hurt or die in his attempts to cure them, as long as he learns from it to better cure someone next time. It was worth it to him. There is one fairly major problem with the storytelling, and it is the various notes and whatnot that you come across over the course of the game. They're treated like items in your inventory, which is a very odd choice. Beyond that, they are just difficult to read. I wish they had just displayed the text for each of these on the screen. They're beautifully rendered in the game, but I have to squint to be able to read any of it, especially on PC where I played the game. All in all, I think this is a likable little horror story between its awesome setting of the haunted prison and the area surrounding it, the various characters you come across, the moral choices that influence how the game plays out, and the lore of the world it creates. There is a hell of a lot to like here, even if it isn't perfect, and even if it never dives too deep into it. So the story is interesting, but how does it look? This is a 6th gen game. It came out on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox first, and the PC port came out later on. And this is strongly evident when you take a look at the bare bones options in the menu on the PC port. There is very little in the way of graphical tweaks to this game, and even by standards at the time, that alone is enough for it to show its console roots. It does show in other ways as well. There are low-resolution, muddy textures spread throughout the game, and the graphics are behind what was possible on PCs of the era. This does make it difficult to judge the graphics of a game like this. Both its age and its console roots means it's not going to look good by modern standards. At the time, though, it was not about trying to get realistic graphics. It was not possible. It was about using developer tricks to make it look as good as possible, and this game definitely pushed the envelope in that regard. Bloom lighting would become common during the 7th generation of consoles, but for the 6th gen, it was mostly used on the Xbox titles. This game made it work on the PlayStation 2, and it combined that with real-time polygonal light shafts for some really cool effects. I fucking love the lighting in this game. They do a lot of really cool things with it, and it is sexy. Beyond that, the Suffering has some excellent art design. All of the enemies in this game were based on various forms of execution. The Slayers are based on beheading. The Burrowers are based on being buried alive, and the Marksmen are based on firing squads. This is such a cool concept, and it allowed the designers to avoid the usual horror trappings like zombies and vampires, which was one of their design goals. They won up that, though, because they brought in Stan Winston and his famous studio known for creating iconic monsters like the Predator and the Alien Queen to come in and work on the monster designs for this game. The end result is that the game has some of the best monsters on this side of the Silent Hill franchise. Extremely high praise, to be sure. The ones that stick out to me the most are the mainlighters. These sickly-looking creatures crawl on the ground and disappear and reappear into pools of blood. They have glowing needles sticking out of their backs. They throw needles at you and they will jump on you and try to stab you with them. I do admit that this has a lot to do with my own personal aversion to needles, however. You keep those things the fuck away from my fur. Another neat touch that I love is how Torque will become covered in the blood of his enemies as he kills them. It splatters all over his body and he becomes covered from head to toe. It's awesome. It's an awesome little effect, though I will say that it does not disappear in the most realistic fashion. It tends to disappear all at once. This can be a little distracting when you notice it, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. The draw distance to this game is pretty short, though. This is most evident in the more open outdoor areas where the environment just seems to materialize right in front of you. I guess this is just a limitation of the hardware at the time, but it is distracting and it is worth mentioning here. I am not sure much could have been done about this, however. All in all, I really like the look of this game. The lighting is awesome. It's not realistic, but the way that they play with it in this game is really cool. It helps the game stand out. The art design is where the game really stands out, though. The creature design in this game is some of the best that you will find in any horror game. I absolutely love it. One of the most important aspects of any horror game is the sound design. Creating a sense of atmosphere relies heavily on how your game sounds. Does it have a tense soundtrack that will make you afraid but wanting to explore more? Does it have sounds that will send shivers up and down your spine as you play? The Suffering is not a typical horror game. It has a huge focus on action. It needs to make the gunplay feel fun or the game will not be fun. The 6th gen consoles were not yet capable of the more in-depth audio that we are used to today, but the audio that is here is pretty damn good. I love the way the various guns sound. They all have a good sense of power and impact to them when you fire them, and this makes them satisfying to fire. The importance of this in an action game cannot be understated. You do not want your audio for your weapons to sound weak because it takes away from the feeling of power that the weapons have, which will take away from the fun factor. Certainly there is more to making guns fun to fire than this, such as visual cues that you are seriously hurting your enemies, but good audio design goes a long way to making the weapons feel good to fire. This game achieves that effect very well. But it is also a horror game. There is a lot of ambient noise that helps create a good sense of atmosphere to it. You hear the barefoot footsteps of Torque echoing throughout the halls of the prison. Each enemy has its own unique and unsettling sound. You can hear the state of disrepair in the facility around you with hissing of steam coming from pipes or the pouring of water. You can hear the roaring fires throughout it and the grounds around it. The metallic sound of the slayers crawling along the ceiling is instantly recognizable. The music in it is also quite unique. The team used a bunch of different objects, such as lead pipes and metal shards, to create a wide variety of tones to create the score with. And it results in an otherworldly industrial sounding soundtrack that is instantly recognizable and is very unique to this game. It works great for its pulse pounding action and its horror atmosphere. I love it. The voice acting is good too. Each character has their own unique mannerisms and ways of speaking, and many of them, such as Ernesto and the Russian guard, have accents that help them stand out. They went the extra mile to make each voice for each important character unique, and it goes a long way to making them more memorable when they are all a little shallow in the grand scheme of things. There is enough of a personality to make them memorable, and the acting goes a long way to selling that. There is one notable exception to the game's audio design that's just flat out bad, and it stands out like a sore thumb when you hear it. That is the sound of birds flapping their wings. This sounds like a stock sound effect, and it is muddy as well. It sounds like something you might hear on an early PlayStation 1 game, and it is so strange when you come across it. You get used to hearing good quality audio, and then there is this one low quality sample that just comes right out of nowhere. Having said that, it is such a minor thing that it really does not drag down the package as a whole. Overall, this is a great sounding game. The voice acting is excellent. The atmosphere is creepy. The soundtrack is memorable. The weapons all sound great. It is the complete package in this regard. It looks great. It sounds good. But how does it play? As previously mentioned, this is an action game. It is primarily a shooter, and you will spend most of your time in combat fighting a variety of enemies. The guns feel powerful and are fun to fight. Movement feels fluid, and you can adjust the stick's sensitivity to your liking. Enemies are a blast to fight. One unique feature of this game is that you can switch between the first person and third person perspective with the simple press of a button. Both ways are perfectly viable. I prefer to play it from the third person perspective because I want the wider viewing angle. The third person also gives you access to a dodge roll that you cannot get otherwise, but there is no wrong way to play this game. Pick your perspective and play. The weapon roster for this game doesn't give you anything too extraordinary. The game starts you off with a simple shiv. This is a blade that you can slash and stab enemies with, but it will quickly bump you up to a revolver. This is a good starting weapon and will serve you well for the early stages of the game, but the game will give you a second revolver shortly afterwards. When you get that, you will never go back to using one again. The two revolvers will remain a viable option for the rest of the game, and they will always be a good backup for when you are low on ammo for your more powerful weapon. You will get a Tommy gun. I have to wonder why a more modern prison has Tommy guns. Maybe they got it from World War II fort because the Thompson was standard back then. That would also mean that they're 70 years old and probably rusty. Should it work if it's that old? After that, you will get yourself a shotgun. This will become one of your go-to weapons as it has the power to knock enemies to the ground. This stops them from attacking you briefly, and it is incredibly useful because this game is not shy about throwing a lot of them at you at once. When you have ammo for it, this is a workhorse weapon that you will rely on. The final gun for the game is a Flamethrower, but I never use this thing because ammo for it is severely limited. This game gives you throwing weapons as well. It gives you flares and flash grenades, but I never found much use for any of these. Beyond that, it will give you dynamite. This is a good throwing weapon if you can hit the enemies with it. It blows up and deals heavy damage to them. It is good for taking out crowds. There are Molotov cocktails as well. This will light enemies on fire, and it is great for throwing into crowds of enemies. You can light multiple enemies on fire with it. I love these. They are fun to use. You get 2 melee weapons as well. The first is the shib. After you kill the first few enemies with it and get your first gun, you will likely never use it in combat again, but you will want to switch to it to break up wooden barriers in your way or something so you do not waste ammo with it. You get access to a fire axe as well. This has better range and deals more damage. When you need to melee something, this will become your go-to weapon for melee attacks. Combat is only as good as the enemies that you fight. We already discussed their art design, but what about fighting them? Well, the first enemies that you come across are the Slayers. They are enemies with blades for arms and legs. They can use them to crawl on the ceilings, and they will jump at you and slash at you with their limbs. They're fun to fight, and you can shine intense light sources on them, and you can catch them on fire. The second enemy you will come across is the Marksman. These guys have a bunch of guns coming out of their backs, and they will stand back from you, ready their weapons, and fire at you. If you can get around to the front of these guys and pop them in the head with your weapons, you can take them down faster that way. Keep your distance and try not to stand still when they are near you. Up next is the main line. These guys are the creepiest enemies for me. They will jump at you and try to stab you with their needles, and they will throw needles at you. They disappear and reappear into puddles of blood. Try to stay moving and try not to let them grab you as you fire at them. They should not take too much to take down. The Noose Men are the easiest enemies in the game to ignore. They lower themselves down from the ceiling to try to grab you. This means that they are not out there for very long. They do not take much to kill, but you can often just run right past them. And they can be a little tricky to dodge, even more tricky to try to bring them out so you can fight them. Burrowers move around like snakes just under the surface of the ground. They can even do this on floorboards. They will pop up out of the ground in an attempt to smack you with their chains. If you are paying close attention, this can be easily avoided. Keep an eye on them when they are underground so you do not miss your opportunity to fire on them. The most difficult thing about these guys is coaxing them up from the ground to attack them. The Festers cannot be harmed through conventional means. They are immune to gunfire. They swing giant balls on chains at you and release swarms of rats to attack you. You will have to kill these guys with throwing weapons like the dynamite or the Molotov cocktail. You can also get up close and personal and kill them with your axe. Keep in mind that they release rats when they die unless you kill them by lighting them on fire with Molotovs. Use those if you can. The Inferno are 3 little girls that light themselves on fire. They leave a trail of fire behind them everywhere they go, and you need to be careful where you step when you fight them. They move quickly and can be a little difficult to track with your weapons as a result. There is no trick to beating them. Just keep shooting them until they fall in the pile of ash. Make sure you destroy the pile of ash, or they will come back up. Every enemy in this game has its own unique way of dealing with it, and it really makes you think on your toes when you deal with them in groups. This helps heighten the tension of combat. Each enemy is fun to fight, and it results in the combat in this game being just awesome. This game is so much fun to play. There is a flashlight mechanic in this game as well. You have a flashlight to light up the dark areas throughout the game, and it runs on batteries. You can store up to 9 batteries at a time, and it will slowly drain over time. You need to collect more batteries as you go along. The game gives you so many batteries that the idea of running out is basically a non-factor. You almost certainly will not run out of batteries. The game has puzzle solving as well. These are not the strange and esoteric puzzles that is common in horror games. They're more practical and logical puzzles. Cover a drain in the immediate area and turn on water to flood the room with it to put out nearby fires. It is that sort of thing, and this game does not take a lot of brain power to figure out, but they are a fun change of pace from the combat in this game. They're simple, but they are a nice, welcome addition. There are multiple occasions in this game where I did lose my way and could not figure out what to do next. It is usually the type of things where you will search for a while to figure out what to do next, and then you will slap yourself when you find out what you need to do, because it will make you feel stupid that you took so long to figure it out. The worst of it was when I was trying to figure out how to get through the mental asylum. That took me a while to get through. I was stuck in there for quite some time. The game is also not a perfect bug-free experience. I ran into bugs like the one with the moral choice that I pointed out earlier, but there was one right here where the ground disappeared on me at this baseball field as well. This did not really affect the gameplay, but it sure does look weird. The game also crashed on me a few times, especially during the ending. I had to close the game and restart it more than once just so I could record the ending. There was one bug in particular that I want to warn you about, though, because this is some extreme bullshit. I reached the last boss of the game. I saved my game at the last boss. The boss killed me immediately after I saved the game, and it started this infinite loop of the game loading my save, seeing Torque dead, and loading again. It registered my fucking save file after he killed me, and I had to replay the entire thing just to record the fucking ending. Holy shit, this pissed me off so fucking bad. Be aware, do not let this happen to you. All in all, this game plays extremely well. The weapons are fun to fire, the enemies are fun to fight, the combat is intense, and it is an absolute blast, and it has some simple logic puzzle solving to break up the action. It plays extremely well and is a hell of a lot of fun. The intense atmosphere and the excellent action combine to make an excellent horror title. What about replay value then? Oh, hell yes. This game has a hell of a lot of it. It has 3 separate endings. So there are 3 paths that you can take through this game based on your moral choices that you make over the course of it. You will need to play through it 3 times to see everything that it has to offer. This does not have a typical modern approach to moral choice systems. There is no list of options for you to pick from or anything like that, like in a BioWare or Bethesda game. Instead, you are presented with different situations and different characters and are given the option to kill them or to work with them. The choice is up to you. There is a demonic voice encouraging you to kill them, and your wife will encourage you to spare them. It is simple and rather black and white, but it works for this game. Who is Torque to you? What do you see when you look at him? Is he a cold-blooded killer who is guilty of the crime, or is he a good man with anger issues that have gotten him in trouble in the past? The choice is yours. You decide who he is through your actions, and given that he is a death row inmate, there is no wrong answer to this question. Torque is who you want him to be. When you beat the game for the first time and go to play it a second time, you are given an alternate intro. This happens before the typical opening scene, and it is a nice bonus for your second playthrough. You see Torque arriving on the island with a group of other prisoners, and you see other prisoners calling him a child killer and deciding to attack him for it. He goes into beast form and rips them apart. I really like this. It adds more incentive to play it at least twice. The entire time you've been looking at the PC port of this game, but it did not start off as a PC game. It originally released on consoles, and this means that there are console versions to talk about. This is the PlayStation 2 version of the game. It runs at 480i resolution and full screen, upscaled here to 720p. It shoots for 30 frames per second. This is the way that I originally played the game all those years ago. While this port works and is perfectly playable, it is not the most ideal way to play it. There are scenes in this game where the frame rate will absolutely tank, and it will feel like the game is flat out running in slow motion as a result. I am nostalgic for this version of the game for sure, but it does not hold up as well as I would like. That much is damn sure. The other console version is the Xbox version. This version of the game runs at 480p if you happen to have the component cables for the Xbox. I used those to plug into a component HDMI upscaler to record this footage at 720p as well. Recording the game this way does force it into widescreen, and I do not know if the game supports that natively or not. If it does look a little stretched to your eyes, that has a lot to do with it. This version of the game has a better frame rate. It reaches 30 more often, and there are a lot of dips as well. The dips are less severe, and you get a more smooth playing experience over the PlayStation 2 version of the game. It does have some problems though. The flashlight effect looks better on the PlayStation 2, and the picture is slightly zoomed in on this port for some reason. I doubt most people will even notice. There is no wrong way to play the Suffering. Of course, the PC version has the smoothest frame rate and the sharpest image thanks to the higher resolution, but the console ports are still fun. This game is awesome. The combat is fun. The atmosphere is excellent. The story, lore, and world building are all great, and there is plenty of replay value. I cannot recommend this game enough. If you like horror and action, you will probably like The Suffering. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I will leave a link below to where you can get the PC version of this game and a patch for it to get it running better. This game was a lot of fun to revisit, and I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at it with me. If you could like this video, I would appreciate it. Leave a comment below. What do you think of this game? If you could share this video, that would help me out a lot. Subscribe for more and ring the bell to make sure you actually get notifications. Doomed Dog out.